Hey, today's show sponsor is Lifetime Value Media, run by our very own Dylan Young, who is chief creative. And he's been editing the show for the last few months, and I have absolutely loved what he does. So, of course, I wanted to bring him on as a sponsor. You'll be hearing more from Dylan a little bit later on the show.
I think we're going to see more people with their blind spots removed. If I am that traditional engineering trope, maybe my AI is going to help me think about, okay, how are people who are using the software, how are they going to have to react to this? And if I'm a much more social dynamic type, but I like a little bit of the technical skills, it's, okay, help me get my code up to snuff with the way more technical side of things.
Once again, welcome to the Digital Customer Experience podcast with me, Alex Turkovich. So glad you could join us here today and every week as we explore how digital can help enhance the customer and employee experience. My goal is to share what my guests and I have learned over the years so that you can get the insights that you need to evolve your own digital programs. If you'd like more info, need to get in touch, or sign up for the weekly companion newsletter that has additional articles and resources in it, go to digitalcustomersuccess.com. For now, let's get started. Greetings and welcome to the Digital Customer Experience podcast. My name is Alex Turkovich. This is episode 59, and I'm so glad you're here today and every week, but especially today because we have Eric Mistry on the podcast, who is with Contentsquare. He is currently a kind of shared services operations manager, but has a rich history in educational technology and AI and customer education. And so we dig into all of those kinds of things in today's show. So, you'll get a little bit of customer education, you'll get some AI stuff and some automation stuff, and a really cool kind of dynamic conversation with Eric, who has a lot of great things to say. And I found out about him because he was actually a guest on the Customer Educated podcast not long ago, and decided, hey, come on over and share your wealth with this audience as well. So he was gracious enough to lend us the time. We've actually had one of his colleagues on before. If you remember, Lane Hart, who was on, 20, 25 episodes ago, is also with Contentsquare. So we're getting the dynamic duo from there. So I hope you enjoy this conversation with Eric Mistry, because I sure did. Hello, Eric Mistry. How are you doing?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm fine. Welcome to the show. It's nice to have you on. It's been
Glad
a bit.
to be here.
Yeah, but we made it happen.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's a lot of stuff we want to get into with regards to digital and customer education and all that kind of fun stuff, because that's your wheelhouse. But I usually try to start these things with like, what's your background and all that kind of stuff. But I was doing some digging. I did a little bit of digging. I didn't do a lot of digging. I did a little bit of digging. And I always love, first off, you spent a lot of time in the hospitality and restaurant industry, which I love, because I think everyone should go through that kind of experience at some point in their life.
You truly learn how to work with the public when you go through that.
Yeah, it teaches you a lot, right? About that kind of stuff. So would be interesting to hear about your journey there. But you also spent time as like a swim coach and a swim instructor and stuff, right?
Exactly. Yeah, I spent most of my time growing up as a swimmer. And then naturally, if you're a swimmer, lifeguard and swim coach and swim instructor, they're the jobs that come most naturally. And I haven't had a job since that I can sit outside in the sun and get tan and stay in a pool and get paid for it. Not so much a thing in digital,
really isn't.
Customer success, but we'll get there.
Yeah. There's no such thing as digital swimming, unfortunately, unless it's like video gaming. Is there
unless there's some VR thing that's coming down the pipe that we don't know about.
That's right. VR Michael Phelps.
You can see what it'd be like to be like, over 6 feet tall. That'd be a magical thing.
Look down at everything, right? Hit your head on walking through doors.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that dude is a beast. But so you spent some time there. Talk to me a little bit about your journey into like CS and CE and all that fun stuff.
Yeah, so after all the fun of being a swim instructor and swimming through college and then graduating, I was looking at what do I want to do, and I knew I wanted to do problem solving, and I went into healthcare software. I worked for about a year for Epic Systems. They're one of the largest healthcare software companies in the world. And then after about a year, I wasn't particularly liking my role. It was sold as a creative problem solving role, and it ended up being a lot more just go down a spreadsheet and run tests
Oh, yeah.
that an AI would be able to do really well these days. So,
Right.
yeah, so I found myself doing a little bit of a pivot and going into higher education because I found what I was really good at was being a translator between technical people and non-technical people.
Mm.
And so there's a role called an academic technologist, essentially. And so I was that person that lived between the faculty and IT department and helped them translate for each other and helped really do cool improvements to the pedagogy via technology. So
That's cool.
not so much the, oh, my computer doesn't work, but the, I want to teach using video in the classroom, or using virtual reality in the classroom, or using some sort of advanced technology in the classroom. How can I do that and make it pedagogically sound? So while I was doing that, got a master's degree in instructional design and educational technology, and then found myself a little bit post-pandemic or mid-post-pandemic wanting to move out of higher education. There's just a lot of demographic trends make it not a great place to be right now.
Yeah.
And a friend from college was working for Heap, posted about it. I was like, this company looks awesome. And then an instructional design role came up and it was a perfect fit, met the team, and then started there. And so I started out as an instructional designer, working on customer education. And then slowly I started finding myself solving a lot of just small problems, like with the scheduling, with the way things were set up, with how we get requests in and out, and the back end of the learning management system. So my job went from 90% instructional design and 10% problem solving to 90% problem solving and 10% instructional design. And eventually they changed my title to suit that. And when Contentsquare acquired Heap, they said, we could use this skill set not just in customer education. So I'm now part of a larger team that serves customer education, digital scales, CS, and a few other teams as well, and tries to work pretty cross-functionally on customer education and customer success.
Yeah. What a cool journey. That's a really cool journey.
It's been a lot of ping pong, but it's been productive ping pong.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's a steady path for sure. And you're not the only Contentsquare / Heap person who's been on the podcast. We've had Lane Hart on.
I say you had Lane, and cool. that's how I found out about the show. It's like, this is great.
Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah, I hear you on kind of the, you get into like this area of expertise, and then all of a sudden, if you're working for an organization that really understands what people do and understands like the value of what people do, it's like, okay, yeah, that's totally applicable over here as well. And yeah, we can plug that in over here as well. So it makes sense that you've got a little bit of an expanded scope as part of the new org.
Yeah, I've been really lucky to have in multiple spots, but particularly with Heap and Contentsquare, managers who recognize that skill set and say, this is where we need to apply that. We're not just going to say, this is what you were hired for. This is your job description. Stay within that. They're going to say, you got this talent. We have this need. Let's work with that. So that's been a really great kind of blessing along the way.
So would you classify yourself as kind of operations in a sense?
Yeah, I would say right now I fit under operations, and it's an interesting question of like, where do I actually find myself sitting? Because a lot of my skill set and a lot of my experience sits in customer education.
Yeah.
A lot of my other technical side of the skill set sits in what would be traditionally customer success operations or just operations generally. But what I'm finding more and more of is my role doesn't really sit anywhere. And the more I start to move cross-functionally between groups, there's problems that are solved when those cross-functional barriers break down. So yeah, right now I'm in operations, but who knows where I'll end up.
Yeah, well, that's just it, right? Like and a huge reason why I've kind of changed the show from CS to CX is the fact that a lot of what we do, because I would say, digital CS is basically operations, just maybe a slightly more customer facing, but like a lot of what we do has to impact the entire customer journey, and because you're taking data and insights and information from one place to the other, and that all has to inform like the customer experience and all that kind of stuff, right? So it's like I think any organization that isn't looking at roles like yours in a broader sense are really limiting themselves. I kind of think like, okay, you've got rev ops, you've got CS ops, you've got support ops, you've got product operations and all that kind of stuff. And each one in its own right is valid because they're working in certain areas, but the connecting the dots is so often missed.
Yeah, it really is. And it's that connecting the dots that I think is going to separate the companies that, as we're looking at this scaling and what we can do at scale,
Yeah.
it's those companies that have those dots connected that are going to be able to outperform and be able to actually work with their data. I mean, when we look at the past few years, like AI is a big buzzword right now, but a few years back was big data and all those pieces. And even with AI, if you don't have your pieces mapped out, if you don't have those dots and know what those dots are, you're going to get outperformed by people who do.
Yeah. Well, and we are, I mean, you and I are chatting, let's see, the week after OpenAI released GPT-4o, which I think is kind of phenomenal. I mean, we say that
Yeah.
about every version that comes out, but I think there's a shift that has happened where all of a sudden these things are incredibly tangible in your everyday life, and it takes, I mean, yeah, the voice assistant thing is super, super cool. And if you haven't played with it, go play with it. But
Oh, yeah, definitely.
like, but also the model itself is pretty staggering in terms of what it can do with image generation and all those kinds of things. And to your point, though, a lot of folks are like, well, okay, how do I implement this thing, into my organization? But, and really my answer 9 times out of 10 is like, it always starts with what you're feeding it, because if you feed it garbage, it's going to give you garbage.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's, nailing the basics and nailing you have to have these fields in the CRM properly filled out just doesn't always map for folks.
Yeah. It's like table stakes,
Yeah.
it's table.
Yeah. And it's that idea that when you are looking at the data, if you're trying to answer the really basic questions and you don't have people looking at the same fields for that same question and answer, it's a huge issue.
Yeah. One of the things we were talking about just prior to recording is something that you and I have in common right now, which is basically we're going through, merger acquisition process. The company I work for just got acquired, so same with you. And I think you and I are kind of on the front lines as well of some of the data migration that's happening and the tools migrations that are happening and things like that. So are you approaching your activities in M&A with like a forward thinking mindset of, okay, we want to plug this into these tools and we want to use our data this way, so we might as well take the opportunity to like clean it up a little bit too?
Yeah, there's so much of that happening, and there's a million different teams working on it. So it's really that trope of a startup where you're building the plane while flying it. And we've got campaigns running right now where it's like, okay, we have to work with both systems as they are right now. Thinking about legacy Heap and legacy Contentsquare, but we also have to have an eye to when we are in that fully unified one system, how do we want that to function? And how do we help move those legacy systems to that? So it's, okay, how do we identify a customer?
Yeah.
Is such a key thing, because it's, okay, one person uses an ID schema that's this way, and one company uses an ID schema that's a whole different thing. And it's when we move into that unified system, how's it going to work? And what do we use to send people emails? Okay, we use this, use that. We're going to land on this product, and how do we move that pieces? And okay, we've got this analytics data from this source and this analytics data from this source. Okay, what's going to be our source of truth moving forward? How far historically back do we need to track in both companies?
Right.
So there's a million interesting questions to answer. And I'm thinking about it from kind of a growth mindset perspective. How often do you get to see two companies merge and get to see where are those fault lines that, until you try to combine systems, it's not really evident? I kind of think about it kind of on a larger scale of like when, my wife and I got married, it was, okay, we're bringing two kitchens together. Whose pots and pans are we keeping? Who's got this? Who's got that? Okay, we both got a blender. Do we need two blenders?
Yeah.
Do we sell both and get an actually nice blender?
Right.
Yeah, all these various things. So yeah, there's a lot to learn from these times, and a lot of things to be careful of. And I think, yeah, it's also just a golden opportunity, like you mentioned earlier, to move forward with fixed data that's going to be better, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is the time to say, going forward, this data is going to be clean.
Yeah.
We know there's messy data in the past because of legacy things that we had to do because we're shoestringing things together. We don't have to do that anymore. We're not going to do that anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Drawing a line in the sand, this is where the bad data ends. And I hope that line stays drawn.
Yeah, for sure. Because, stuff always gets messy pretty quickly.
Always, yeah.
Yeah, I love that analogy of the the merging of kitchens, because it's so true. Like, and it gives you an opportunity to see how the other org was doing things, and they might be doing things better in one place, and you may be doing things better in another place, and so why not take the best of both worlds?
Exactly.
Which is cool. Hey, everybody, just a quick break from today's show to introduce our sponsor for this episode, which is Lifetime Value Media. I've got Dylan Young, Chief Creative, with me. He's been helping me edit the show for the last couple of months or so, and it's been for me personally, it's been a massive time saver, and just having somebody who knows CS in my corner is absolutely great. But Dylan, do you want to tell us a little bit about Lifetime Value Media and what you're up to?
Yeah, we started Lifetime Value Media to serve what I believe is a void in the space with refreshing, educational, humorous content. On the flip side of that, we also help other folks that are creating content, upping the quality of their shows, and also helping them reach new audiences if they're not already in the podcast or the video space.
Yeah, I mean, we've been making this show for about a year now. I should say I've been making this show for about a year now, and it takes a considerable amount of time to get in there and edit and find all the goodness and do all that. And now that you're doing that, it's helped me out tremendously. But to your point, you're not just helping existing shows; you're helping people who want to get into the space and just media content creation in general, right?
Yeah, we do find that there's a pretty wide gamut of folks that need these services. There's a lot of folks that want to just be the creative. They want to talk to their guests and hand the rest off. They don't want to have to learn editing software. They don't want to learn what's the best way to deliver their RSS feed to their audience members. There's a lot of folks who might have that down, but they don't get the YouTube distribution piece of it. A lot of other folks who don't know how to optimize any of it. And so we offer services that can help anybody in any situation. So everything I just explained is all existing folks who have some level of production already occurring. But we also do have packages for folks who want to get into the podcast space or the storytelling space in general. We can help them create entire brand kits. We can help them figure out their distribution model. We can help them figure out their voice in what is a crowded market. And then we can do all that stuff, the recording, the editing, distribution after the fact, all of the artwork that comes with it, the clips. We can do everything.
Yeah. Well, look, I appreciate what you do for the community. I appreciate what you do for this show and others, I might add. Looking forward to seeing who else you get to work with.
Thanks, Alex.
And I think, too, just from a pure career standpoint, and you mentioned the magic word of mindset, like a lot of people are really, I mean, I guess scared, but a lot of people approach, a merger or an acquisition from this standpoint of, oh God, like we're in for it now. And yeah, okay, you are. It's hardly ever like a super clean thing, and it's messy and usually accompanied by redundancies and all those kinds of things, right? But I think ultimately, if you're working as part of an integration, as a company integration, there's like opportunities to do stuff that you don't often get to do, and it does look good on a resume if you've helped a company to integrate and kind of show the outcomes of that, right?
Yeah, and with everything, there's it's obviously terrifying when it's first happening. So okay, sure. Do I have a job when this finalizes and that kind of piece? But it's also with that, it's like, okay, how much of that is in my control versus out of my control? And with everything in life, I just try to approach it from, okay, I've got what happens to me and pieces I can control and not control with that. And then how do I react to it? How do I want to solve for it? And that's the part that's really much more in your locus of control. And so that's where I've tried to take it with all of these pieces. It's like, okay, I don't have control over when we switch to this unified CRM, but I do have control over how I need to solve my processes with the current state of things. So that's a lot of where we have to go with these things.
Yeah, super healthy mindset. That's awesome. That's cool. Well, you're going back a couple of steps here. One of the one of the questions that I always ask every one of my guests is essentially their elevator pitch of digital CS and what they would say to somebody who doesn't know anything about it, what their definition would be. So I'm curious, what yours would be.
Yeah, and admittedly, I come from this from a total outsider perspective,
which is why I love asking you the question.
Christy Hollingshead, who hired me for Heap, was the head of customer education when I first got there, basically gave me a crash course and here's how the company is built, because I was used to just higher education, so I didn't even know customer success was a thing. I didn't even know how these orgs were built. So the simplest answer I kind of think about, and how I really try to explain to folks who I talk to here, my friends, family, is basically engineering and product build the product, sales sells the product, and then customer success helps people actually use and continue to use the product. And then where digital customer success comes into play is we take everything customer success traditionally does and really apply additional tools to help scale it, help to make it happen on a more consistent basis, and really turn it into something that's sustainable. Because a lot of times when you look at traditional customer success, it's a lot of people doing a lot of things really manually and really hands-on, whereas digital customer success, we can take those actions, take those patterns, and really help turn one person into 4 impact-wise.
Yeah, I love that. And I think this kind of blends into what we were kind of skirting around earlier, which is this notion of artificial intelligence, because AI, like it or not, is becoming a regular part of our lives, and I think those that embrace it now are going to have a much better time of things in 5 years' time than those that don't. But I think you and I are both avid students of not just generative AI, but like machine learning and all that kind of stuff in general. I'd be curious to get your insights and what you've seen around the practical use of AI today in the workplace versus maybe where you see stuff going.
Yeah, and I think getting back to kind of, you mentioned earlier, we're talking a week after the 4.0 release, and I wasn't really sure what I'm more excited about with that whole set of announcements, because a whole new model is great. I'm super excited for 5 and 6 after that, and then simultaneously you have Google releasing their own versions and Microsoft releasing a flavor of GPT with Copilot. So there's a million models being released all the time. So that's exciting in itself. But I think the biggest announcements with that 4.0 model is one, that they're getting more efficient. They're getting easier and lighter to use. So it's it's half the cost. It's twice as fast. Those speed and cost improvements, I think, are where we're going to see it take off for a lot of people, because it becomes actually cost effective to put it into people's products. So I think we're going to see more and more tools that may or not have been able to afford it before. Or it may have been an additional surcharge to say, okay, we can absorb this into our operating costs and still provide these AI features. So I think that's one place we're going to see a lot of really interesting things. And then the additional piece they announced is a lot of the price lock features behind the Pro account. So being able to use those GPT agents. So kind of a pre-programmed, very specific version of ChatGPT that does specific tasks. That being released to the general public, and being able to use the new model as the general public instead of the last generation model. I think those two moves are going to be hugely impactful in having more people use it, because now I can actually recommend to my friends, get in it, open an AI account. You can use the latest model. It's a little restricted in how often you can use it, but you can use the same thing I'm using. So that's huge. And I think, to answer the question that was actually asked, the use of AI in the workplace, I think there's there's a whole spectrum on it, obviously. I think where we're going to see a lot of huge impact is just making people's lives a little easier. So when it comes to scheduling, instead of having to really look at the calendar blocks and say, when is a good time? We can look back and say, okay, you typically schedule these meetings here and this time. This person's calendar is moved, so you may need to reschedule that. So a lot more of that proactive, almost like having a very good intern or a very good personal assistant. We're seeing a lot more of
Executive
that.
assistant. Yeah.
Yeah. Seeing a lot with note-taking apps, and especially as we get, the issues around security and privacy handled with that. Having that, so it's, okay, I'm having a Zoom call. There's action item mentioned, and it's like, I take my own notes, but I miss things sometimes. But it's, if my AI assistant can say, hey, here's your notes, and I have already put it in the task management system you have in a different product, that's going to be great. And then really just where AI excels is rewriting content, putting things in a specific format, parsing a lot of the responses. I think we're going to see a ton of AI in the kind of service desk area, right? Where you're trying to, okay, you've asked this question. Normally that tier 1 service has to look up that documentation, send it to you. There's a little bit of delay there. If an AI can handle, so let's say 60% of those tickets that come through, and you can put a human on the more advanced ones, those answers that aren't immediately clear in the documentation someone missed, or, oh, you just need account reset and you have the right credentials. Great, let me take care of that for you. So I think we're going to see AI delivering a lot of the lighter tasks, those things that take time, but you don't need to be a real professional person doing them. That's where we're going to see a lot of that. And then additionally, I think it's just the skill set enhancement. So I am a admittedly not great programmer. I'm self-taught. I've read enough books on Python. I program for fun, but I can ask ChatGPT a question. I did this week. I said, I need to parse a CSV with this set of columns and this set of columns. I need to match on this date, and I need all my dates converted to the same sort of format. And then I want to output it with these particular columns. And then also create a visualization using Python. Can you do that for me? That would have been 2 or 3 days of me really doing spaghetti code to do a good output. I got that done in about an hour with trial and error and doing that. And that's me as like a not admittedly great programmer. You put that in a real programmer's hands, wow. And conversely, you put it in a non-programmer's hands and you say, okay, it'll start to ask you the right questions. Say, oh, do you need to have it sorted in this? Do you need your dates the same? We're going to see so much of that where it just turns us into way better at what we want to do. Our jobs. And even, instructional design, we're seeing quiz question generators is one that I started to use a bunch. It's like, here's my question that I have. Here's the right answer. Here's the training data. Give me some fake answers or help me write quiz questions. Things that I can do well, and I can, as an expert, look at it and say, no, that's not a good question. No, that's not a good answer. So it's also that moving from being the person who produces the content to being much more of an editor is where I think we're going to see a lot of moves.
Hey, I want to have a brief chat with you about this show. Did you know that roughly 60% of listeners aren't actually subscribed to the show on whatever platform they're listening to it on? Now, as you know, algorithms love likes, follows, subscribes, comments, all of that kind of stuff. So if you get value out of the content, you listen regularly, and you want to help others to discover the content as well, please go ahead and follow the show, leave a comment, leave a review. Anything that you want to do there really helps us to grow organically as a show. And while you're at it, go sign up for the companion newsletter that goes out every week at digitalcustomersuccess.com. Now, back to the show. So much good stuff there. And I want to circle back on a couple of those things. The first is the engineering aspect of it, which obviously this is a CX podcast, but hey, we love engineers too. Very early on in my career, I had the revelation that software engineers were equal parts technically minded people and extreme creative people, because the go-to kind of opinion or I guess persona of a software engineer is like somebody who's very techie and antisocial and all that kind of stuff. But like, engineers, like they're out doing all kinds of like, they're dancers and they're singers and they're musicians and because they're intrinsically very creative people. And I think to be a good engineer, you have to be a very creative individual. And I think what's interesting about how good generative AI has become from a coding perspective might open the door for a lot of people who wouldn't normally like get into engineering to actually get into engineering. And so we might, just my assumption is we might see a proliferation of like much more creativity in just the creation of products and things like that. But to circle things back, to CS front, one of the first things you said was around the openness of ChatGPT now, where basically even with the free account, you have unprecedented access to these models. So if you're not already like in ChatGPT, go now. The other thing that they've made available is all of these custom GPTs in their store. And it just so happens I was looking through some of them and like Churn Zero has a customer success one, for instance. And it'll help you kind of draft messages based on kind of what you want to do or what you want to send to your customers and those kinds of things. And so like we're starting to see this stuff become much more available and accessible to the masses, not just accessible in terms of you can actually go there and do it, but accessible in terms of like it's not intimidating,
Yeah, it really removes that intimidation factor, and it's that idea of, I think when we're looking at what else is going to happen in the workplace, there's going to be certain folks, and we're seeing a little bit with some prompt engineering roles, but folks whose job it is to really get those AI models to produce fantastic results.
Yeah,
because it's not that I think that's been the kind of the hype curve downfall for AI is people say, oh, well, I asked it to make a picture of this and it turned out terrible, or I asked it this thing and it gave me something. And it's like, the prompts I'm writing right now, the prompts I'm using to program these GPTs, like one of them's like 30 pages long of text to say, here's exactly what I'm wanting you to do. Right. And I think that's a really interesting skill set that, you don't always have to be super technical to do, but you have to be a good communicator. And I think, to go back to your earlier point about the trope of the antisocial engineer, what I found is, the engineers who make it are the exact opposite of the trope. They are some of the most social, dynamic, interesting people. It's like, you need that to understand who you're solving for. And it's that I think we're going to see more and more of to where the other thing is, I think we're going to see more people with their blind spots removed, where it's like, okay, if I am that traditional engineering trope, maybe my AI is going to help me think about, okay, how are people who are using the software, how are they going to have to react to this? And if I'm a much more social, dynamic type, but I like a little bit of the technical skills, it's okay, help me get my code up to snuff with the way more technical side of things.
Right.
So it's removing the hurdles for people.
Yeah. And I'm also curious to see how the learning aspect of these models is going to enhance, because now, it'll theoretically remember, who you are, and various things that you feed it over the course. It's not like these separate kind of instances of chat conversations. It's like a cohesive thing. And so it might learn over time that you are a hyper creative or you're not.
Yeah. That's been a very interesting thing with because you can see in the settings for GPT, what is its memory of you? And because I write prompts for all sorts of things, and I'm, solving for friends and family and like my own personal projects, and it's got a little bit of some strange ideas about me. So I'm like, no, that's not true. That's my friend I was asking for. It's like, I was asking about, okay, what tools do I need to do for, fixing a forest and renovating it to build a treehouse? I'm like, I'm not building a treehouse anytime soon. But ChatGPT said, Eric is building a treehouse. I was like, it's a dream, but it's not true.
Wants to, not is. Yeah.
True.
I want to dig in a little bit on the customer education front, because you and I share something in common, which is we both spent time in the trenches as instructional designers. building content. Were you an articulate person or a captivate person?
I was an everything person.
You were an
everything
person.
I did a lot of Rise. I did a lot of actually just building by hand. A lot of, when I was in higher education, a lot of the tools that were available to us were just the LMS native tools. So got very creative very fast with some of those.
Yeah, I remember the first time I cracked the code on Captivate variables, and I was like, oh, wow, here we go. So, I think we can both describe ourselves as learning nerds. And I think that is
very much so.
I mean that in the best way possible. Admittedly, it's been a bit since I've been in the trenches of actual instructional design and building content, designing things, and writing quality assessments, because we all know there's not quality assessments out there. And I think we skirted around this a little bit, but I want to get your sense on where are we headed in CE in general and customer education in general? I mean, sure, we can say micro learning and we can say, all these fancy terms, whatever that might or might not mean something to somebody. But on the tactical kind of foundational level, like what do you see the next few years in CE being?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. Luckily, I was just reading the Forrester report Shannon Howard and her team put out, and super interesting. If you haven't read, I got a little bit of early access to do a reaction to it, but it's out now, and it's incredible. But I think one of the biggest and most interesting trends we're seeing in customer education is moving out of kind of the videos on a separate academy. I love that. I've built so many academies and LMSs in my time.
Yep.
But I think we're seeing a lot of almost those in-app guide tools starting to function more and more as education. So it's a combination of in-app guide tools plus a strong documentation base, I think, is where a lot of customer education is going to start to move to, because these AI tools, and this is where AI really can continue to come into play, is they can look at this and dynamically say, okay, yep, let me follow your clicks on the page. Let me do a screen recording, and then we'll build your in-app guides, or we'll build your documentation based on what you're doing with a little bit of guidance from you, some voiceovers. There's some incredible tools out there that are starting to emerge, because I think when we look at customers, when we look at how do people want to learn, people who come to the academy, do they do great? But I think I can say as a rule in customer education, it's not always the majority that come to that. A lot of people just want to have that intuitive guide or pop up there's a new tool. Let me have a little tool tip that says, do you want to learn more? We can give you a little tutorial.
Yeah.
It's a piece of information like that. I think that is also looking at that barrier breaking down, because traditionally, and for our team, it's true, that tool tip, like the in-app guides, either belongs to product, belongs to scaled customer success, which is the team I'm kind of housed in right now. Whereas they are such a great tool for education.
Yeah.
I think we're going to start to see a lot more breaking down of those silos of, okay, everyone needs access to this tool and everyone's going to be using this tool. So how do we make it all those different functions and goals work together to achieve that thing? Because really, customer education also shouldn't be living in a vacuum. I think sometimes it's shunted around and put in a little box somewhere and not given the resources it needs. It really should be an integrated part. And customer success, similarly, should be integrated into the whole idea. You shouldn't have your sales folks not know what customer success is doing, and vice versa.
Yep. I couldn't agree more. And it's interesting because it starts to blur the lines between like education and performance support, and I think those lines have always been kind of blurry, but they're getting blurrier because, say what you want about your audience being, more kind of short attention spanny or whatever, but like your purists are going to say that an education team or a learning team always needs to produce courses with a strong, learning objectives and assessment, and Kirkpatrick model this and Kirkpatrick model that. But at the end of the day, I think especially in customer education, like if you're putting the content in front of your customer when they need it, where they need it, job done. Like, let's go,
Yeah, and it's the traditional instructional design. Like I got by the book trained on every model, everything, and it's like that is fantastic when you have the time and energy to fully go through that. And sometimes product is changing on you on the hour. By the time you've created a training for something, it's outdated, being able to adapt those models and adapt that what does make a really good course? How can we take those same principles and say, okay, this is our target audience, so we can start to design for this person. These are the things we want to teach. And like, we know this wording maps to their audience. So you can take a lot of really good foundational pieces of instructional design, but then apply it at speed and scale.
Yeah. The age-old problem in SaaS and customer education is the button moved, the platform changed color, the added fields, all the blah, 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 blah. And now I have to spend a week updating all of my learning content and all that kind of stuff. Like every customer education person in SaaS and software struggles with that phenomenon because it takes, the more content you have, it takes an inordinate amount of resources to update all that content. So it'll be interesting to see, and I want your take on how long it's going to be before generative AI helps us like solve that problem specifically.
It's already kind of happening. There's a company I've been following for a while that's called Cluso that I think does a really good job of this. And there's also like Videate where your videos are produced by essentially running running a web extension that re-records your video, but it looks for those code blocks instead. So the button might move, but if the button name or the button ID is still the same, like your tooltip is going to be pointing at that button, and your voiceover, if the button text changes, says the new button text. And that I think is where we're going to see a lot of that. And with those in-app guides too, it's, it can say, essentially where I see it going is running an audit scan every day to say, we're going to have an AI agent essentially go through this, take screenshots as it goes, which we know they can do already,
right?
And try to run your process. And if something goes wrong, then we'll try to fix it. If you can't fix it, then we send you a human alert, so you go in a human and fix it.
It's like an automated change log.
Instead, those are the kind of things that used to have to be done by a human. It's like, okay, every day someone from education has to run through our flows and check to see if they're working and check to see if product has changed things. No, that's the kind of stuff where AI and automation are really going to come and play. And I think that's really another key element that I think a lot of folks with this AI piece are missing is AI is one half of the equation. Automation is the whole other half. And if you're looking for who's doing the best in this, Zapier is absolutely incredible. I don't I should just get a t-shirt and just say sponsored by. Maybe just, I'll take a meal a month, Zapier, if you're listening. But the ways they're tying together AI and automation is incredible. And having really good automation compounded with AI, you can move so much faster.
Yep. I'm actually, it's funny you mentioned that because just this week I was working on a flow in Zapier to help me kind of stay on top of some of the, some trends and stuff that are happening in customer success. Because Lord knows there's stuff happening all the time. But like I'm using Perplexity, which if you don't know is the greatest thing since Google because it totally has replaced Google in my day-to-day. But using Perplexity to like give me some digests of like what happened this week in customer success, feed that into a spreadsheet or whatever. And, like it's amazing what you can do. But to your point, like, it's like the enterprisation. Is that a word?
I think so.
Sure. It's like the enterprisation of all these different disparate tools because the cost of building this stuff has gone so low that we have all these people building all these different things and they all have different bespoke use cases and niche things here and there. But there's, you got to have something like Zapier or Make to like pull it all together.
Yeah. And it's interesting seeing just, historically thinking about how did we get to this point? All the companies that have been building APIs to interact with each other and interact with, Salesforce and interact with all these other tools, like the fact that we have such a strong API backend architecture to all these tools makes all this automation platform work well. And it also means that like if you feed an API bit of documentation to something like ChatGPT, you can start to ask, hey, what can I do that I can't do in this product? So even on our LMS, it's fantastic. It's like, I just want to update all these courses can I feed this a spreadsheet and you give me some API commands to make it happen? Like, that's the kind of stuff that we're going to be seeing more and more of.
Dude, you know what? You know what's really great is this conversation. You know what's really not great is that we're running out of time, and I feel like we could go on forever. So I just want to real quickly just say thanks for coming on, and we should probably do a part 2 because I think there's a whole swath of things that we haven't covered. But
that would be my pleasure.
You did warn me before we started recording that you had a hard time narrowing down your list for my next inevitable question, which I ask everybody, which is like, what's in your content diet and what you're paying attention to?
All right. So the biggest hack I have right now for newsletters, there's an app called Meco. It's MECO. Attaches to your Gmail, and it grabs all your newsletters and puts them into an app so you actually read them. So it's replaced almost all my social media. So instead of pulling up Instagram or Facebook, I pull up that, and I actually have read most of the newsletters I get. So
that means you need to subscribe to my newsletter if you're not already. This is a great
time. If you're not already subscribed to Alex's newsletter, click now, or pull it up and do it, or ask your AI assistant to subscribe for you. Yeah. And then also just podcasts in general. I find the Tim Ferriss show is a really good one just because of the quality of guests and the quality of interviewing is just fantastic on that. 99PI, 98% Invisible, just because there's so many things that you look at on a daily basis that, they're there and someone's designed them. I find incredibly cool. A whole bunch of cooking podcasts. And then books wise, I'm just a kind of a voracious reader. I always have my Kindle notebook with me, but I also have some physical books as well. Big ones on my list right now that I'm reading, Range by David Epstein, is basically about generalists and how generalists are thriving in this, what seems like a hyper-focused world. $1 Million Weekend by Noah Kagan. Man, basically how you can start up businesses and think about scaling. And if you're not a startup person, great. It's super applicable to your in-job life too.
Yeah.
And then Jane McGonigal, she's a futurist. Currently I'm reading Imaginable by her, but I also have Reality is Broken, which is one of her earlier books on my desk. She is such an incredible thinker and such a just future-focused person. And then I always like to keep some fiction going too. So there's a Japanese translation book of Before the Coffee Gets Cold, which if you're looking for a short read, if you're like, man, I haven't read in a while and I want to get back into it. Before the Coffee Gets Cold, there's 4 books in the set. Each one's about an hour and a half read. It is beautiful. It's a unique take on time travel, and it's just an enjoyable experience. So go for that.
Oh man, I think you get the award for like probably best list of like content diet.
Well, thanks. I'll take that. I'll put that on my resume.
Yeah, you should.
I got awarded that. I'll do a digital badge for it.
Yeah, that Nico one. That's gold. Yeah, because I struggled hard with that.
Yeah. Meco it's one of those apps I stumbled on in one of my newsletters, and then it has been a mainstay on my app homepage.
Yeah. Okay, that's huge. Any shout outs you want to give?
Yes, absolutely. On LinkedIn, Joe Ryan, he does customer education weekly. Fantastic. Every Monday or so comes out with, it's a really easy to digest newsletter. Highlights a lot of really cool people doing cool things. And then Shannon Howard, I tell him, is just such a good distributor of content and ideas. If you just follow those two, you're going to see so many more people too. And there's so many more that I can't even begin to count. But those two are kind of my 2 highlights. I make sure I read every single post they read.
I love following people that amplify other people because 100%. They're getting great content out of it that they can amplify themselves with, but it's like the community thing and it allows you to, like you said, like if you follow those 2 people, you'll be in good shape.
Yeah.
Eric, it's been a pleasure. I appreciate you joining, and let's do it again.
Absolutely. It'd be my pleasure. Yeah, there's so many more rabbit holes and tangents. And if we talk again in a month, there'll be 8 more AI things coming out.
That's right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Cool, man.
Have a good rest of your day.
Yeah, you too. Thank you for joining me for this episode of the Digital CX Podcast. If you like what we're doing, consider leaving us a review on your podcast platform of choice. If you're watching on YouTube, leave a comment down below. It really helps us to grow and provide value to a broader audience. You can view the digital customer success definition word map and get more information about the show and some of the other things that we're doing at digitalcustomersuccess.com. This episode was edited by Lifetime Value Media, a media production company founded by our good mutual friend Dylan Young. Lifetime Value aims to serve the content, video, audio production needs of the CS and post-sale community. They're offering services at a steep discount for a limited time, so navigate to lifetimevaluemedia.com, go have a chat with Dylan, and make sure you mention the Digital CX Podcast sent you. I'm Alex Turkovich. Thanks so much for listening. We'll talk to you next week.
What's up, guys? It's Dylan here. I hope you enjoyed this show. If you're running a podcast and you need some help, or you're interested in starting one from scratch, give us a shout and let's talk about how it is we can help you. Reach out to us at lifetimevaluemedia.com and let's get started.